Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, providing instant analysis throughout the day. And we've got a historic final to bring you for the first time since 1986. Kentucky has defeated Florida. The Wildcats end the longest drought in FBS. One school losing to one school 31 consecutive times. It's over. Kentucky has defeated Florida 21-16. And I can't think of anybody else that I'd rather be talking to right now about this result than Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football, a long-suffering Kentucky fan who has seen better times in recent years. Those better times, Kevin, have not included a win over Florida, even when you've been a little bit better like you were last year. But finally, this was the game.
Yeah, it's still kind of sinking in right now. It's like, oh my gosh, Kentucky won. So I've got, we talked about this last night. My dad and I were at the game in 1986, the last time that Kentucky beat them, here in Lexington. And, the game kind of went along the lines of what we talked about. And then the most Kentucky thing ever, it came down to the last play. And for once, the fortune's actually shown on Kentucky. And, yeah, it's just, it's kind of cool. I mean, no other way to say it. It's cool to be on the other side of this, because it's been so many times, gone the other way so many times. Not just with Florida. You go back to the LSU game back, 2002, the Hail Mary game. There's been plenty of others, like that. So it's just, yeah, it's just cool. Just letting it sink in here for a minute, and excited to talk about the game.
So to correct myself, 27-16, Kentucky defeats Florida. So the one of the very few plays that I saw, since I don't have the network, even though I work for them, I don't have the network that supplied the game, the SEC network. But we talked about Lynn Bowden making big plays, and he certainly had a game changer in which it opened up the game a bit for Kentucky when it was still 14-10 with that long one that he brought in from Terry Wilson. I don't have the exact yardage, but it was a beautiful play.
Yeah, it was somewhere along the lines of, I think, 45, 50 yards. And as you said, Kentucky fans have been waiting for a year and now 2 games. And you could just see it. He started on the left sideline, ran across the middle, just outran the Florida defenders, and Wilson hit him, right in stride, and he took it in for a touchdown. And like I said, as you said, put him up, 21-10, and at that point you're thinking, okay, that's, you're feeling pretty good. But then I think I tweeted this after that. I was like, I can't help it. I have that feeling in the pit of my stomach, and it's like life of a Kentucky football fan. But yeah, no, Bowden, he played well. And, if you want to jump in, we'll talk about, Terry Wilson. He didn't have a very good first half. Couple of turnovers, had a fumble and interception. A lot of the, Twitter quarterback, coaches were, pull him, put in Gunnar Hope, take him out, which is kind of what we talked about, last night. If he has more, more fumbles, more turnovers, what's going to happen? And the coaching staff stayed with him, and he proved him right. Hit that pass for Bowden, and he had, had a touchdown run on his own. Had threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for 1. I think he threw for 100 it's either 151 or 171 yards. 151 yards, yeah, 11-16 for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns and the 1 interception. And he ran the offense really well. And we got to that fourth quarter. I say we, but got to that fourth quarter, and Benny, the other thing that we talked about, I said Benny Snell's got to have at least 150 yards for Kentucky to win. He had 175. So they kind of relied on Snell in that fourth quarter. And then at the very end, it was the defense. Kentucky's, they were ahead, 21-10 at that point, and had to punt. Kentucky's punter, Max Duffy, trapped them, pinned them down at the 1-yard line. And, to Florida's credit and Felipe Franks' credit, they drove 99 yards down the field for a touchdown. But, they missed the 2-point conversion, and Kentucky got the ball back, got a couple first downs, and, and then Kentucky punted again, and then that fourth down play, Josh Allen, the guy we talked about, got in there, made the hit on Franks, and I was sitting there watching it, and my 10-year-old son was like, "Man, you can stay up and watch this. This could be history making here." So he was like, "Is that a fumble? Is that a fumble?" I was like, "I'm pretty sure it was a fumble." And if you saw, like you see on the sidelines, Coach Dupes was like, "It's a fumble. It's a fumble." He's telling Devontae Adams picked up the ball and ran it. Actually ran it to about the 5-yard line and stopped because they thought the play was blown dead. And you can see Stoops, go, 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 go. And there was a number 64 offensive lineman for the Gators who was chasing him. And then all of a sudden it's just kind of like almost a Three Stooges thing. Is like, he moves, and he got it in for the touchdown. And that was they ruled it. They went back and reviewed it, and ruled it a touchdown. We're all thinking, with Kentucky, given Kentucky's luck, that it would be overturned, and the Gators would get one more chance. But it wasn't to be, and so the streak is over.
The streak is over, and Kentucky is now 2-0 and has an SEC win in the books as well. So if we look at what's history here, is obviously finally defeating Florida. And even if you would finish, and God forbid, 2-10 this year, but you beat Florida. But the big picture is an SEC win. So that's always been the downer, not just losing to Florida, but that's almost always an early season game. And so you always get that, bam, that one peg in the loss column right out of the gate against Florida early in September, typically. And so it hurts in both ways in regards to keeping this painful streak going, but also getting an early SEC loss. But considering South Carolina lost today, and you get that first win on the board in the SEC, that also from getting away from the historic in the series with Florida, but just looking at this particular team and trying to accomplish some things, but maybe in taking another step in its ascendance in the SEC, defeating a good team and winning one in conference is a big deal as well.
Oh, definitely. As you said, Florida, beating Florida is huge. As you said, South Carolina, I thought that was going to be a much closer game than what it was. And, Georgia put a whooping on them, basically. Missouri, struggled with Wyoming for a while today. And then, like Kentucky plays Murray State next week, FCS school, should have no trouble with that one. And then, they hit the meat of the schedule. The next 3 games, they have Mississippi State at home and South Carolina at home, and then they go to Texas A&M, before their bye week. If there's, before the season, I had I had Kentucky pegged to lose 2 of those 3. I had them beating South Carolina, and they've beaten them 4 years in a row, and so they're hoping, trying to get 5 there. But yeah, I mean, it's Kentucky starting off 1-0 in the SEC is not something you see very often. So it's nothing can be nothing but a positive and a big step forward, hopefully going on for this season.
Kevin McGuffey's joining us from Last Word on College Football to break down for what is for him just about the happiest he's got to be as a football fan, in terms of a fan. And for the rest of us, if you love college football, this is historic right here, because Kentucky was suffering the longest losing streak in FBS play against one team, had not defeated Florida since 1986, and they got the job done in the swamp, 27-16. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, that you had named Benny Snell your top running back in the SEC this year, and few would agree with you that he was the best during the offseason. Most of us made our lists, and he ranked high. I had him somewhere in the top 3, but a few would join you at number 1. But considering his workload with his team, considering the target on his back, considering the lack of a passing game to take off that pressure, it's one thing to run for $125 against Central Michigan last week. It's another thing to go to the swamp against what's probably going to be one of the 15 to 20 best defenses in the country without a dynamic passing game to take the pressure off. When he's the target, let's stop him. He's enemy number 1. Let's stop him first. And he drags around the Gators for 175 yards.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to go back and correct myself. It's Devontae Robinson. Devontae Adams. I think plays for the Packers or used to play for the
Devontae used to
Packers.
play for Oregon, I believe.
Yeah. So I don't know where I
Oh,
got
Devontae
that
Adams.
name, but
Yes,
anyway,
yes, yes. Wide
he was
receiver,
who scored that
Devontae
last
Adams.
touchdown.
Yeah, I'm with
But
you.
yeah, no, you're exactly right. He
I'm
averaged
thinking of
ran,
Vernon Adams, actually. Go ahead,
yeah.
Kevin. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, he ran. As you said, ran for 175 yards, averaged 6.5 yards a carry. The Kentucky as a team ran for 303 yards, which is going back to when we previewed the game last night. I was like, Kentucky's got to run for. I don't know if I said 300 yards, but I know I said at least I think 250. But yeah, like I said, running 175 yards against that Florida defense on the road in the swamp. I mean, like I said, if there's a better, if apologies, to Georgia, but if there's a better running back in the SEC than Benny Snell, I don't know who it is, but.
And so Terry Wilson was able to supplement that with 105 yards on 10 carries.
Yeah, he was like I said, he did that. It's that dual threat quarterback is what won him the job, and what the coaches were hoping to see, and that's exactly what he did. He ran for a touchdown on his own. He had 10 carries, 105 yards with that one touchdown. I think his longest run was like 31 or 32 yards. So he showed, especially in that second half, he kind of calmed down and showed what the coaches, I think he kind of showed to the fans, the Big Blue Nation, some of the doubters, why he won the job and why the coaches have been so high on him.
So what makes him such a good runner? Is he that elusive, that dynamic, or just one of these JT Barrett? Yeah, he's mobile, but he just is such a smart runner that he picks up this kind of yardage.
I mean, the biggest thing is just, I think a little bit of that is just the speed factor. I mean, he's, if not one of, I think he's like top three on the fastest players on the team. If he gets a step and gets out in the open, I mean, he can take it to the house, which is what he did, which he did on that one touchdown tonight. He does have some, he's got some good moves, but I think it's just his speed. He's just, like I said, the defensive, you hear him talk about it in practice. It's like, man, he's so fast. He's so fast. If he just needs a step on the defense and he's going to be gone. And that's, he kind of proved that tonight.
So, Kevin, I think you understand my situation here. I try to keep track of everyone, so I'm watching the best games. So I got to say, I'm not watching a whole lot of Kentucky football most of the time. So for example, last season, I remember checking in on the Georgia game for maybe a quarter to a half. And then besides that, I watched the bowl game, and I always watch all the bowl games. And so I'm looking at the schedule here thinking, when am I going to get to see this Kentucky team play? Because I'm always looking at the best games. You would have to assume, as we talked about last night or the other night, that Murray State's a victory. So the Cats are going to be 3-0. And then you get a nice little stretch. I don't know if you're going to consider it a nice little stretch. Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. And I know you were laser focused on this game against the Gators, and rightfully so, but you probably had an idea what was going on at Kyle Field. And I watched almost that entire game. And what Texas A&M showed, despite a loss, was, man, if that team comes out and plays like that on a regular basis, they are going to be really good this year. I kind of doubt that they're going to be that amped for everybody, but they were really good. So it's exciting to be playing in such big games because I'll get to see Kentucky play because I'm going to watch a large portion of these three games. But obviously, this is a gauntlet to get through.
Oh yeah, it really is. It's the toughest 3-game stretch of the season. And I was flipping back and forth. Don't have the old days of picture in picture, but they were showing during the SEC Network broadcast. When they weren't talking about the streak every 10 seconds, they were talking about they were showing some highlights from that game. Yeah, I was very. I thought Clemson would win that game at least a couple of touchdowns, but I think it's one of those, to use a Kentucky basketball analogy. I think everybody seems to play their best game against Kentucky in basketball whenever you face them, and it kind of seemed like Texas A&M really rose to the occasion, and then that awful. Well, I don't know what your thoughts were about that about the touchback on the fumble, but
my thoughts are basically that I would really have to take into account. So I'm very much into the integrity of the field and the integrity of the rules, meaning that the rules need to make sense. So they need to be complementary, meaning there's one specific set of rules for the playing field and then for the end zones, and they have to be consistent how you treat the playing field and the end zones. So I don't see an issue with changing the rule to say anywhere else on the field, if the offensive player loses the ball and it goes out of bounds, the defense had yet to seize and gain possession of the ball. So they failed to do so. It went out of bounds. So you give it back to the offense. That should be the same rule for the, even if you gave it back to the offense, fumbling it through the end zone and said, well, and penalized the offense for fumbling the ball and brought it back to the 20 and gave them a first down. I would be in favor of that, but it doesn't seem right that there's a rule in play that the defense had failed to gain possession of the ball, recover a fumble. That doesn't seem consistent with any other rule on the field, and they get the ball back. They get the ball. And it's a risky play for the wide receiver, and I hate to see it. And I know the kids love to do that, dive for the pylon, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of strategic sense because there's 2 minutes left in the game. You're going to get the ball first and goal at like the half-yard line. It's a slippery, messy field. The ball's wet, and you see it all the time, even when the ball's not wet, that the kid lays out and he hits the ground, and before he's down, he loses possession of the ball, and it goes back to the defense. It's just too risky of a play when you're going to score like 97% of the time anyway, and you're trying to squeeze the clock, and you would have more opportunity to do that by snapping the ball a couple more times. So it's just very unfortunate to see it go that way. Fortunately, for the integrity of this particular game, Texas A&M got the ball back after a bad punt. They moved it down the field. Kellen Mond threw a crazy, ridiculous touchdown pass to tie the game, or a would-be tie of the game. Then they didn't get the two-pointer, and so Clemson more legitimately held on and won the game. And so I was glad to see that play not decide the game in that fashion. But I think that the rule should be changed. And I just think that I would be coaching my players, hey, I love the effort, but it's just not worth it.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I just saw the play and then I saw them talking about it. But to go back to what you're saying, I would not be surprised to see. Obviously, the Murray State game is like on the SEC alternate channel, but it wouldn't, the next 3 weeks, it wouldn't surprise me to see, Kentucky on one of the, maybe not be the CBS game of the week, but, should be an ESPN. I would think it'd be on one of the family of ESPN networks because, this year and in past years, Kentucky has started strong and then finished slowly when they've hit the meat of the SEC schedule. This year, their schedule is kind of, in my opinion, is kind of front loaded with trips to Florida and A&M, and then you have Mississippi State and South Carolina. The second half of the schedule, you got Vandy, Missouri, Middle Tennessee, Louisville. The last I saw, they were struggling with Indiana State. They've not been. Obviously they got blown out the week before, and then Tennessee. Tennessee looked good today, but of course it was East Tennessee State they were playing. The script could kind of be flipped this year. That Kentucky, I think I had them maybe 3-3 going into the bye week, and then finished in the season 4-2. My preseason picks, I had them 7-5. But I think any one of those next 3 games after the Murray State game could be and should be national televised games. And something, nothing against, as you said, you work for ESPN, but you can't get the SEC network, which just seems totally bizarre to me. But anyway, so.
I can watch the games on my laptop. At times, it depends. That's kind of a different situation, too. So, Kevin, this is a bit of an inside joke, but we've got our guy, George. He's a huge Florida fan. I credit him for getting on the chat and taking a beating on the chat right now. He's a big Florida fan, and he has now adjusted his Final Four, his college football playoff selections, to Ohio State, Clemson, Kentucky, and Florida. So this is going to be the first ever 2 teams from the same division advancing to the college football playoff. So you've been ushered into the college football playoff based on this victory.
Yeah, even the bluest of true blue fans, I don't think is going to have Kentucky playing in the championship or making it to the playoffs. But stranger things have happened. It seems like always there's a team every year that goes on. Kind of like in basketball, a team that goes on a huge run, you don't expect it. But like I said, I'd say 7-5 with this win here. I think 8-4 is doable with depending on how that back half of the schedule plays out. Now, if they lose all three of those games to Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Texas A&M, then it may be a little bit of a struggle. But like I said, I've got them. I have them picked to beat South Carolina, and I think there'd been talk in the preseason. The Kentucky fans were a little, or the players were a little. I don't know. Felt what's the word I'm looking for? They beat South Carolina 4 years in a row, yet South Carolina was picked second. Disrespected. That's the word. It's late. I'm still overjoyed here. Disrespected.
Anything can be tolerated, Kevin. I totally understand.
Well, I was going to say they feel almost disrespected because they've beaten Carolina 4 years in a row, but yet Carolina and I'm one of them. I had Carolina my preseason SEC. I had Carolina, had Georgia and I had Carolina second. So and they said we've beaten them 4 years in a row. So I think that's definitely going to be a heck of a game. And Mississippi State, you don't know. They went into Kansas State and won today. With Joe Moorhead, I think seems like they're still kind of figuring things out maybe, but it's like I said, first time in 31 years that Kentucky can say that they've beaten Florida in football. So it's that joy is probably going to last for a pretty good while, I think.
Well, the SEC has barely missed a step thus far. I certainly considered it the best conference top to bottom, with the Big Ten being a little bit better through the top 5 or 6 to start the season, but I may have to amend that. I'm going to give that some analysis after week 3 because most of the non-conference games will have been played at that point. But aside from Tennessee getting blown out against West Virginia, the league has looked amazing out of conference, in particular with the LSU win, the Auburn win, Mississippi State, as you mentioned, going to Kansas State and pretty much dominating the second half of that game and marching on with a win. Georgia, of course, their win against South Carolina. It's an SEC team, but they look to be as nearly as dominant as they were as the class of the division this past season. So should be interesting. We have yet to really take in that monumental upset. We almost had it at Kyle Field, and we understand that in the fourth quarter right now, Kevin, Samford is defeating Florida State 23-21.
Yeah, I had seen that score before. I was actually looking. I was looking for something else, and I was looking at that score, and I was like, "Is that legitimate?" But apparently, that would not be good for the Willie Taggart era in Tallahassee if they started 0-2 and lost to what we used to jokingly call Samford and Son. But anyway, because we've in the OVC, I think they were in the OVC for a while in basketball, and I'm a graduate from Morehead State University, which is a smaller school in Kentucky, and I think anyway, so
the pride of Phil Simms.
Yes, that's right, pride of Phil Simms, yes sir.
Let's all keep in mind that Nick Saban lost to Louisiana Tech his first year at Bama.
That's true. That is true. So yeah, see that's the other thing that I pointed out. Or I mentioned, I did that post, which, hey, I don't have to do these anymore. Kentucky's worst losses to Florida. You would think in an age now where you have like these FCS schools beating, the big time schools, you would think that somewhere in that 31 years that Kentucky would have gotten, some breaks, and ended that streak, and it never happened for whatever reason. But as you said, like Samford's beating Florida State right now, and you have the famous, Appalachian State a few years ago, beating Michigan. So,
and that's what made the streak exactly the way you just phrased it right there. That's what made the streak amazing. Is not that Florida beat Kentucky over and over and over, because you would expect that looking at the state of the programs generally over these 30 years. Florida has been one of the top 10 programs in the country most of that time, sometimes near the best in the country. And at their very worst, yes, I'm not going to pinpoint particular seasons, but generally at their very worst, they're like a fringe top 25 team. While Kentucky at its very best has basically been a fringe top 25 team, has been awful and has had moments of, postseason going to bowl games, but 6-6 kind of teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's generally been the state of Kentucky football over the last 30 years. So it's not comparable, but for it to go on and over and over and over and over and over and over and over, you can look at all the mismatches across the Power Five for teams that play each other year after year after year after year. Ohio State, Indiana, take that for one example. Alabama against, Ole Miss, whatever it is. And this hasn't happened with any other rivalry to this extent. And that's why it was the longest streak in the country and somewhat improbable over that many years.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And one thing that I just watching the game last year and watching the game this year, and I think it's kind of, I think, a credit to Mark Stoops and the staff. Honestly, looking at the two teams, if you look at them, you don't really notice a whole lot of, the Florida guys don't look so much bigger, so much, there's not a whole lot of difference in the two teams, right now. Now, when, I think Dan Mullen gets in there and gets his system, gets the recruiting going again, I think that may change, but just the last couple of years, and that was another thing that people were talking about, that I saw on my Twitter feed a lot tonight during the game, was like, there's no negligible difference, it seems like, between these two schools. And I can't remember, certainly in the last, 20, even 30 years where you could say that. And I think it's, a credit, I will say it's a definite credit to Coach Stoops and the program right now.
Well, I didn't touch my pocketbook of this week, but had I, that was the game that really jumped out at me. Not that I thought Kentucky was going to win necessarily. It certainly didn't surprise me that they won. I would have given Florida about a 60-40 win-loss ratio in that one, and I did predict Florida to win the game, but Kentucky in 14 points, I jumped all over that in my predictions and took the 14 points against the spread. Thought that was a bit much.
Yeah, I thought it was too, and and being all truthful, if you go back and look, I said Kentucky, I said Florida 27, Kentucky 20 was my prediction. So I had the winning score right. I just had the wrong team, but I've never been so happy to get a pick wrong in my life.
Exactly. You'll take that each and every time, even if it's
yes, sir. But yeah, I agree with you. I thought the 14. I think it might have been down to like 13.5 by kickoff, but I thought that was way too high for that game. And it turned out it was.
Stanford's in the books with a 17-3 win over USC. And we're celebrating Kentucky's win over Florida. At least Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football is. I'm the neutral analyst, so I'm just reporting and letting Kevin wax poetic about his Kentucky Blue and historic night in the Commonwealth of finally throwing off all the weight of 31 years off the back. And Mark Stoops, drenched in Gatorade as well he should have been after the final score hit the scoreboard with double zeros, 27-16. Join Kevin, Tony Siracusa, Mike Laval, Lauren Beasley, the rest of the crew at Last Word on College Football for college football coverage across the board. We had Jason Ray join us earlier today to talk Oklahoma as the Sooners looked bound and determined to win another Big 12 championship. Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by. I'm going to let everyone know that I'll take a call or two before I lock in on Michigan State and Arizona State for the rest of my night. It's 860-325-3687. Kevin, we appreciate your time on a late night, and we're glad that you took a few minutes to celebrate with us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Like I said, it's always love getting on here and talking college football with you. And like I said, it truly is. It's a historic night for the Kentucky football program, and I that it's going to be interesting to see where things go from here.
All right, Kevin, you have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
All righty. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Again, that's Kevin McGuffey, Last Word on College Football. And I'm hanging out for Michigan State, Arizona State. I've got it locked and loaded actually on the DVR, so I'm going to watch it from the beginning and catch up to the live feed. I see that USC has lost to Stanford on the road 17-3. So the Cardinal defense, which we didn't expect to be this good, certainly shut down JT Daniels and company. We had two USC contributors on this week, Alicia De Artola from Reign of Troy, and also Scott Wolf from Inside USC. So we'll try to have them back to analyze USC status following the loss at Stanford by 2 touchdowns. 860-325-3687. Otherwise, I'm going to bid you farewell tonight. I'm going to work on some game recaps, my thoughts on the weekend that will be out by tomorrow, and also the top 25 that makes sense. The Mark Rogers TV top 25 that is actually based on the results on the field through 2 weeks. And we'll get the final results in today. Then I'll make my top 25 and make my case tomorrow, and look forward to that. And of course, we invite the discussion and debate. One more time, it's 860-325-3687. If you'd like to call in and voice anything that is on your mind concerning college football, 860-325-3687. Again, we will see you the rest of this weekend with our top 25 and also game recaps from an exciting day in college football here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Tell your friends, tell your family that we exist, that we're here, and we're the place to be for college football discussion, debate, and analysis. We'll see you guys next time.